The 112th episode of AEW Dynamite took place from Chicago this week, and we are going to talk about all the big moments from the show. And of course, we have to start with how the show started, the big promo battle between CM Punk and Maxwell Jacob Friedman, arguably two of the best talkers in wrestling. Actually, not even arguably. They are two of the best talkers in wrestling. And we got kind of a tease that they were about to enter into a feud, enter into a rivalry last week. CM Punk just came out and interrupted MJF. MJF tried to introduce himself to CM Punk. Punk just laughed, didn't shake his hand, and walked off. And that was just all we needed. That's just all we needed to see to know that, okay, we're about to get an MJF versus CM Punk feud. And the first time that these guys are going to cut promos on each other is going to be in front of CM Punk's hometown Chicago crowd, in front of his hometown Chicago crowd. And you've got to love that, because every time CM Punk is in Chicago, it is a raucous atmosphere. A raucous atmosphere. So what I thought we would do for this segment is we're going to score it. We're going to add up all the lines that MJF said that we thought were pretty good, all the lines that CM Punk said that were pretty good, and we're going to apply a score to them. And we're going to see who ended up coming out the winner of this promo battle between MJF and CM Punk. So MJF starts talking, and MJF went uninterrupted for several minutes, which is fine, because he's funny. And so the first line that was said in this promo battle that we're going to award points for was when MJF said to CM Punk, "Never in my wildest dreams could I imagine a straight-edge man could look so much like a meth addict." And I thought that was pretty good. I thought that was a pretty good line. So we are going to award MJF 5 points. 5 points for saying that CM Punk, despite being straight edge, looks like a meth head. So it is now 5-0 in favor of MJF. MJF continued, still without CM Punk getting a chance to talk. He said, "I'm about to verbally finish you quicker than your UFC career." Ooh, that one. We're going to award some points for that. Not as many as saying that he looks like a meth addict, but we're going to give him 3 points for that. 3 points for taking a shot at CM Punk's rather failed foray into mixed martial arts. So 8, well, I'm sure CM Punk made some money. So was it a complete failure? I don't know. He tried his best. But MJF is up 8-0 in this promo battle. All right, but then Punk got a chance to talk. And Punk landed some good shots in here too. He said that he didn't know that MJF stood for Maxwell Jacob Friedman. He thought MJF stood for "my jealous fan." And this was a likely reference to this photo that had been going around of a young MJF at an autograph signing with CM Punk, getting his picture taken and looking very excited to see CM Punk. So we're going to give Punk some points for that. Not too many points. We're just going to give him 2. We're going to give CM Punk 2 points for that line. So now the score is MJF 8, CM Punk 2. But then Punk really had a line that scored some big points. Really got a big reaction. And so Punk is talking about how MJF thinks that, oh, he's revolutionary. He's doing all these great things for the wrestling business. But then Punk said, he thinks what he does is revolutionary to the wrestling business when in reality, he's just a less famous Miz. Oh, and this got a reaction. This got a big reaction from the crowd. They started chanting Miz at MJF. And that's something that might just follow MJF from here on out for a little bit. If the crowd decides, hey, we really want to let MJF know we're kind of against him here, just chant Miz at him. It seems like it's the perfect insult. It's the perfect insult for MJF because he is so good at getting heat and such a natural heat magnet. But like the Miz is kind of the same style of heel, but in a WWE sports entertainment way. Whereas MJF is that style of heel and kind of a pro wrestling, almost like a Roddy Piper type of way. And so being being compared to The Miz is something that in real life, MJF would hate. He would hate to get compared to The Miz when he could be compared to a Roddy Piper. So chanting Miz at MJF, that's pretty good. We're going to give CM Punk quite a few points for this. And I decided that we are going to award CM Punk 100,000 points for that line. 100,000 points. So that affects our scorecard quite a bit here. So now the score is MJF 8, CM Punk 100,002. So Punk takes the lead. MJF was leading for the first few lines. CM Punk now in the lead in this promo battle. MJF, though, he got in some other lines and was able to close the gap a little bit. And he was talking about how CM Punk has some rather large bags under his eyes. Kind of looks tired a lot of the time. And so MJF said, based on your eyes, if anybody needs to go to sleep, it's you. And we're going to give MJF 4 points for that line. That was a pretty funny line. He does have some big bags under his eyes. So now that brings our point total to MJF 12, CM Punk 100,002. MJF continued, he called him PG Punk. Said he might as well be preaching hustle, loyalty, respect, and a bunch of John Cena references kind of after this. He was talking about how CM Punk does all these robotic promos about just being happy to be here, and maybe Punk's not so cutting edge anymore. He's just a cookie cutter babyface was maybe the implication here, like a John Cena. That was pretty good. We're going to give MJF some points for that line. We're going to give him 5 points. And so now that brings the total to MJF 17, CM Punk 100,002. CM Punk got a line in here. He told MJF, I was selling out Madison Square Garden when you were marking out for Rosie O'Donnell. And he also noted that the timing doesn't really add up there. When MJF was on the Rosie O'Donnell show, he wasn't really selling out Madison Square Garden. But it doesn't matter. The point remains. And we're going to give him some points. We're going to give him 5 points for that. So now the score is MJF 17, CM Punk 100,007. So still a very big lead for CM Punk, but and the next line that Punk said that I think deserves a few points is he was talking about the 4 pillars of AEW. So basically the 4 young guys that everybody thinks are going to take the promotion into the next generation. So that's Darby Allin, that's Jungle Boy, that's Sammy Guevara, and Maxwell Jacob Friedman. So Punk then says to MJF that regarding the 4 pillars, you don't even realize you've been replaced by Britt Baker. And we're going to give Punk 10 points. 10 points for that line. So the score now is MJF 17 and CM Punk 100,017. So that 100,000 points we handed out for the line about being a less famous Miz, that's really the difference here. Otherwise, they'd be tied. That was this isn't really a straightforward scoring system, though. So feel free to do your own at home or add them in the comments section. So Punk kind of had a cool line at the end of this. I'm not going to give him any points for it, but it was just an interesting fact. I didn't know this. He talked about how the reason that, this is coming from after MJF had said, oh, Punk, you're always second best. You were second best to Cena. You were second best to Triple H. And so Punk starts talking about how Chicago is referred to as the second city. And so there's nothing wrong with being number 2. And he said, but Chicago isn't called the second city because there was a better city or there was a first city. It's called the second city because after the fire, they just burnt the city right back on top of the flaming embers. And I guess this was after the Chicago fire, and that's why they call Chicago the second city. I had no idea. I'm assuming that's true, and Punk has got his facts straight, but that's kind of cool. So, and then Punk, the final line that we're going to give points to, I thought was a really great line. He said near the end of it, he said to MJF, the only way you're going to be number 1 is if you wait around long enough for Tony to have a daughter that you marry. I thought that was pretty good. We're going to award Punk 100 points. 100 points for that line. And so now the final score here, the final score MJF versus CM Punk. MJF gets 17. CM Punk 100,000. 117. So a victory of 100,100 points for CM Punk. Very impressive. Of course, this is all subjective. MJF was pretty entertaining during this as well. So that was like the opening 20 minutes of AEW Dynamite, and it was awesome. It was Punk in Chicago. It was Punk and MJF on the microphone. Can't do much better than that. It was really great. Then after that, we finally do get the match between CM Punk and QT Marshall. Just a basic match, just a way to, give everybody a chance to cheer CM Punk, to feature CM Punk in a match that he's going to win. So he starts the match off just doing a whole bunch of body slams. He does an elbow or a flying clothesline off the apron, and then we go to commercial break. I can't remember how he did it, but somehow QT Marshall sort of gained the offense during the picture-in-picture. Then when we get back from break, as so often happens, the good guy, the baby face, makes a valiant comeback, and he hit his big moves of doom, his neck breaker, his running knee in the corner, the flying Macho Man elbow drop off the top rope, and then he wins it with the GTS. So that's basically like your first third of this Dynamite was all CM Punk in Chicago. It was excellent. It was an excellent way to start the show. All right, next up, we went backstage, and Christian Cage was there with Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus, the Jurassic Express. They noted that they are ranked number 1 in the top 5 tag team rankings once again, and Christian said that he's going to make sure that this time they win the tag team championships, and then Luchasaurus let out a big roar, I guess a roar of approval. And so I guess we're going to get the Lucha Boys, the Lucha Brothers, and Jurassic Express at some point for the tag titles. Maybe that'll be on the Battle for the Belts show on January 8th. Maybe we'll get that on Winter is Coming. But it looks like Christian's going to be taking on some sort of mentor role. And of course, the three of them teamed up and defeated the Super Click at Full Gear. So we'll see what happens. Christian says he's going to lead the Jurassic Express to the tag team championships. So we'll just have to see what goes on there. Then we went to a backstage segment. Eddie Kingston was eating some cake. He was eating some cake, and then 2.0 and Daniel Garcia show up, and they talk about how they read his article in the Players Tribune, and about how Eddie Kingston isn't hungry anymore, and Kingston just points out his cake, like, yes, I am. I want to eat this cake. But 2.0 said, no, you're not hungry anymore, and that's death for a professional wrestler, for any athlete when they're not hungry, when they're not motivated anymore. And anyway, this all led to a thing where they tossed coffee in Kingston's face, and anyway, all of this is just to build up Daniel Garcia versus Eddie Kingston, which is going to take place on Rampage Friday night. Well, it took place last night, but we're obviously not going to spoil the results for you. Anyway, Eddie Kingston, Daniel Garcia on Rampage. That should be pretty fun. Then we went for our second match, just our second match, as we're almost done the first hour. It's the Gun Club, Billy Gunn and Colton Gunn going up against Bear Country. And so noted that the Gun Club has appeared. They're now ranked number 4? Yeah, they're number 4 in the tag team division. If that's not correct, I will... No, sorry, they are ranked number 5 in the tag team division. So Billy and Colton Gunn, they're 8-0. They're ranked number 5 in the tag team division. And they are taking on Bear Country here. Just a quick match, under 2 minutes. Lots of interference from Austin Gunn on the outside. Gun Club pick up the victory, but the real stuff happened after the match when Sting and Darby Allin came out. So Sting comes out first. And this is all because on Rampage on Friday night, Darby Allin defeated Billy Gunn. But then after the match, the Gun Club beat up Darby Allin and Sting. So now Sting comes out, and it looks like Sting's going to get some revenge. So I think it was Austin Gunn charges at Sting on the ramp, but Darby Allin just comes flying out of nowhere and flies right into him. And then Darby Allin and Sting hit the ring, but the Gun Club bails out. And so now it looks like we're going to get the Gun Club versus Darby Allin and Sting at some point. So when are we going to get that match? That might just be a match we get on Dynamite, we get on a later Rampage, or it could be something that we see on Winter is Coming as well. Next up, we had a segment in the back where Adam Cole and Bobby Fish were hanging out backstage. And so they were talking about how they're pretty good friends. You know, they're like best friends. They're like almost even family. And this led to the best friends overhearing them and sort of a backstage altercation between the best friends and the former members of the Undisputed Era. And this was all to set up a match which is going to take place on Rampage. Adam Cole and Bobby Fish are going to be taking on Wheeler Yuta and Orange Cassidy. And so this is kind of, I mean, the Bobby Fish-Adam Cole relationship is very interesting in AEW right now because we've seen Adam Cole sort of leave Bobby Fish to get beat up. Basically, didn't so much like bail on a match recently, but has kind of left Bobby Fish on his own. And so we don't really know. It seems unstable. The friendship, as much as they were saying they're like family in this little backstage segment, it seems unstable. But there's also something else that's going on with the former Undisputed Era members that I think is worth noting. And that's Kyle O'Reilly's contract with WWE is up on December 3rd. And I think it's just straight up. Like, I don't think he's got to wait 30 or 90 days after. I think that's the end date for his contract. And I'm assuming, and I obviously don't know this, and if I did, I wouldn't tell you, but I'm assuming that Fish and O'Reilly are going to link up again. Because that's a tag team that has a long history together. They have a long history against the Young Bucks in AEW. I mean, Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly, they had great matches against the Young Bucks in New Japan Pro Wrestling and Ring of Honor. They're a fantastic team. So if they form Red Dragon, which was their team name before they went to NXT, plus that's the original 3 members of the Undisputed Era. So are we going to see Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, and Bobby Fish sort of like together again? And if so, are they aligned with the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega? But we also saw that Kenny Omega and Adam Cole, they sort of teased some dissension there when Kenny Omega was saying, hey, I'm going away for a while. Can you guys hold down the fort? And Adam Cole was like, yeah, of course we can. And Kenny Omega said, I was actually talking to the Young Bucks there. Like, there was a reason we saw that. But also with definitely how the Young Bucks do things on BTE and stuff that they've been doing even before AEW. They'll throw out red herrings. They'll throw out things so we're supposed to think something, but then they're going to give us something else. But then they'll also throw out things that do preview what we're going to get. So everything seems so unstable with this little broken social scene of Adam Cole, the Young Bucks, Bobby Fish, Kenny Omega. You don't know where anybody's going to land. Who's going to end up aligned with who? I don't know. But this segment backstage, Adam Cole, Bobby Fish with the best friends, that is setting up a match that'll take place on Rampage. Then we went to a very interesting segment. So Team Taz has been recruiting Dante Martin. Lio Rush has kind of been mentoring Dante Martin, but Dante Martin doesn't really say much. But sometimes it looks like he's not altogether pleased with Lio Rush cheating in their matches or interfering in his matches, but he's never really said anything. And so this segment begins, they're just in a room. Team Taz is on one side of the table. On the other side of the table is Lio Rush and Dante Martin. Taz says to Lio Rush, I don't even know what you're doing in this room. Why are you here? And Lio Rush is kind of acting like there's no way Dante Martin is going to sign this contract. And then what does Dante Martin do? He grabs the pen, signs the contract, eats some chips that Hook offered him, then hops over the table and leaves with Team Taz, leaving Lio Rush dumbfounded. And this sort of continued on social media after. Lio Rush sent a bunch of tweets to Dante Martin saying like, pick up your phone, what's going on? And all Dante Martin tweeted out was this picture of the FTW logo. And then his tag team partner and brother, Darius Martin, tweeted out an updated version of the FTW logo, which sort of sums up how he feels. So I guess what we've gotten here is Dante Martin has sort of surprisingly joined Team Taz. And what does this mean for Lio Rush? Lio Rush then later put out a tweet saying that he's looking for new members for his team. So a lot of interesting things going on with Dante Martin, Team Taz, and Lio Rush. All right, so next up, we had the TBS Championship Tournament quarterfinal. This is the second last quarterfinal. There's still one to go. And we had Thunder Rosa taking on Jamie Hayter. So this was a good match. The crowd was really hyped up for this match. There was a lot of people chanting for Jamie Hayter. I wonder if that's just because there's a lot of Britt Baker fans in Chicago. But obviously a lot of fans chanting for Thunder Rosa as well. And so this was great. But then we get to the end of the match. And the end of the match involves, Rebel is trying to interfere, and this allows Britt Baker to come in the ring. And so Hayter is holding Thunder Rosa, and then Baker goes to give her a super kick, but Thunder Rosa moves out of the way. Baker hits Hayter with the super kick. I think there's a couple of moves before the end, but eventually Thunder Rosa ends up with a pinning combination on Jamie Hayter, gets the 3 count, and now we'll move on to the semifinals of the tournament. Then after the match, Jamie Hayter and Britt Baker looked like they were not getting along too well at all. And so it looks like there's some dissension there with Jamie Hayter and Britt Baker. So I wonder if Jamie Hayter is going to be leaving that trio at some point. So let's take a look now at the TBS tournament brackets and see what that leaves us with here. So now Thunder Rosa moves on to the semifinals to take on Jade Cargill. And that's a very interesting match because Jade Cargill is undefeated. She hasn't been pinned. She hasn't submitted. She is 18-0. Undefeated in over a year in AEW. So now you could obviously have Thunder Rosa beat Jade Cargill and be Jade Cargill's first loss. That doesn't look too bad for Jade Cargill. I mean, Thunder Rosa is sort of built up as one of, if not the toughest wrestlers in the division. But Jade Cargill's like a monster. She's getting a monster push. And she maybe, she hasn't been wrestling for very long, but the way she looks, like she just look like she's so built together and put together that I wouldn't be surprised at all if Jade Cargill wins this tournament. But for her to do that, she's going to have to defeat Thunder Rosa. So, I don't know. I mean, easily one of Thunder Rosa or Jade Cargill could walk away with the championship. However, it really feels like we're still building up Thunder Rosa versus Britt Baker at some point. Because remember, before Britt Baker won the world title, she lost to Thunder Rosa in a lights out match in what was the main event of an episode of Dynamite. Now, technically, in AEW's storyline, that match didn't happen because it's a lights out match. So the results don't matter at all. So in terms of how they book the shows, how they book the matches, how they book title shots, the rankings, win-loss records, that just didn't happen. But everybody saw it happen. So it's one of these things where Thunder Rosa beat the person who's the champion, but that doesn't mean she gets a title shot because the match technically didn't count. But we all saw her beat who's now currently the champion. But if Thunder Rosa wins the TBS title tournament, I'm not sure she can, it's not easy for her to then take on Britt Baker because you'd have to have the two champions go against each other. And what, are you going to unify the titles so soon after just creating this belt? I don't know if that's going to happen. So I could see Jade Cargill beating Thunder Rosa. Maybe Britt Baker plays a role in it. Maybe Britt Baker attacks Thunder Rosa in the back, and that leaves her with injuries, and she's unable to compete well against Jade Cargill in the semifinals. Like, something like that could happen. Or Thunder Rosa could beat Jade Cargill, go to the finals. I don't know. And that's kind of the cool part about this tournament is basically anybody who's left, I think, could win it. So looking at the brackets, we've got Thunder Rosa versus Jade Cargill in the semifinals. Then we've got Nyla Rose is moved on to the semifinals, and she'll face the winner of a match that will take place next week on Dynamite between Chris Statlander and Ruby Soho. So that's interesting. Like, could Nyla Rose win the TBS championship? Yeah, she could totally win the TBS championship. She's a former AEW Women's World Champion. She gets built up like a monster a little bit. And it almost feels like they need something like a new title for her because she's already been champion. She kind of cleaned out the division for a bit, but then, she lost a bunch of matches to Hikaru Shida, although she's now beaten Hikaru Shida thanks to Serena Deeb. So Nyla Rose could possibly win. I don't think Chris Statlander is going to win the tournament, but Ruby Soho could totally win the tournament. So 4 out of the 5 wrestlers left could easily come out of this tournament the TBS champion. Even Chris Statlander could. She's very popular as well. Just seems like maybe she's the least likely out of the 5 left. Like, it seems like I feel like Ruby Soho is the bigger favorite between her and Statlander in that quarterfinal, even though Ruby Soho's not in the top 5 and Chris Statlander is. But anyway, what happened here was Thunder Rosa moves on. She defeats Jamie Hayter. And that takes us backstage, and Chris Jericho is being interviewed when 2.0 and Daniel Garcia come up, and they have a backstage altercation. I think Chris Jericho referred to one of the 2.0 members as having a square head. Jericho's really big on insulting people's heads lately. Like Dan Lambert, he was a fat-faced whatever, and this guy here, he's got a square head. So that's sort of Jericho's thing right now, is head shaming people. He's a head shamer. But anyway, so I guess that means we're going to get Jericho versus one of the members of 2.0 somewhere down the line. Then we went to Britt Baker and Tony Schiavone's Friendsgiving. And this was all ruined because Jamie Hayter had gotten eliminated in the tournament. There was that kind of dissension shown between Jamie Hayter and Britt Baker after the match. So Baker's not in a good mood. And then Tony Schiavone revealed to her that he had some bad news. Schiavone noted that Rijo in the Casino Battle Royale from however long ago was not actually eliminated but went out under the bottom rope. So this means Rijo is going to get a chance to face Britt Baker in a non-title match, like a title eliminator match they call them. So if she wins, then Rijo will earn a title match against Britt Baker. And this was similar. They did this last month on an episode of Rampage with Abaddon versus Britt Baker, but Baker beat Abaddon in the match, so Abaddon didn't get a title match. So that's what took place on Friendsgiving. Next up, we had Bryan Danielson going up against Dark Order member Colt Cabana. So this is Colt Cabana in his hometown Chicago crowd. And so the fans have really turned against Bryan Danielson, of course. After last week he was in Virginia, he cut that awesome heel promo on the Virginia crowd. I'm so surprised to see Bryan Danielson a heel so soon after debuting. But he's so good at it that it's fine. It feels... It's just sort of strange that he went heel so fast. But again, he's so entertaining at it. He's so good at getting booed that you can like him and boo him at the exact same time. We have an article up at allelitejournal.com where we talk a little bit about how Bryan Danielson getting booed now, it kind of illustrates AEW's unique approach to baby faces and heels. Because nothing about Bryan Danielson's character has changed at all. He's saying the exact same things that he would have said to Miro, or he would have said to MJF or any other heel had he been going up against them. So it's not like a lot of times when you have like a character go from a good guy to a bad guy, there's this Breaking Bad moment or this storyline arc where he becomes a different person. Bryan Danielson is not a different person. He's the same guy. He's just going up against people the crowd really loves and saying things about them that would get cheers if he was saying them to like Miro or MJF or someone. He is obviously doing some other things too, like he's holding on to his submission holds after the bell, but he might have done that as a good guy too. So anyway, he's a bad guy now. But he goes up against Colt Cabana, and they have like a British style grappling match in the very early going, up until Bryan Danielson decides that he's just going to kick the hell out of Colt Cabana. So he kicks him a bunch, and somewhere in there, Colt Cabana's tooth comes flying out and lands flat on the mat. And Bryan Danielson ends up making Colt Cabana tap out to the label lock. And then he points the camera at the tooth and later picks the tooth up and shows it to the crowd and the camera. And Tony Schiavone gets in the ring to interview Bryan Danielson after the match. And Bryan Danielson talked about how the last time he was in Chicago, the fans had a very different opinion of him. And he said that he hasn't changed, which, as I just mentioned, I think is true. I think some things may have changed. But in his mind, he hasn't changed. He thinks the fans have changed, and he called them fickle. And it's really entertaining when Bryan Danielson says the word fickle. And so he talked about kicking out Colt Cabana's teeth, and he talked about how he's going to continue to do this to the Dark Order up until he takes on Hangman Page. And next week they'll be in Duluth, Georgia. There's a couple of different wrestlers from the Dark Order who are from Georgia. The only ones that I can think of are Alan Angels is from Georgia, and I think Anna Jay is too. So we'll see. And then the week after, is the week after Winter is Coming? No, the week after they are in New York, Long Island, New York. And I think John Silver is from Long Island, New York. He's billed from Long Island, New York. I don't know if he's actually from there. His Wikipedia says something a little bit different, but I think they could do Bryan Danielson versus John Silver the week after Nick's. And then the week after that, they're in Garland, Texas for Winter is Coming. And I'm not sure if there's anyone from Texas in the Dark Order, but he also could take on Hangman Page on that show. Where's Preston Vance from? No, he's from Michigan, so that doesn't work. So we could have 2 weeks of Bryan Danielson taking on hometown favorites again coming up. And then after that, they're in Garland, Texas for Winter is Coming. I'm not sure if there's a Dark Order member from Texas. But then Bryan Danielson mentions Hangman Page's name, and immediately Page's music plays. Hangman Page comes out. Unlike last week, he is dressed to wrestle. He's in his gear. And Page says that he wants to wrestle Bryan Danielson tonight. And Bryan Danielson scoffs at this and says, "Oh, of course you would want to wrestle me right after I've already had a match. That's not cowboy. That's coward." And I thought that was a pretty interesting line. Anyway, they end up coming to blows a little bit, and Page ends up trying to go for the buckshot lariat. Danielson bails out of the ring. He scurries to the back, and that's the end of the segment. So when are we going to get Bryan Danielson versus Hangman Page? They announced the Battle of the Belts show on January 8th tonight, so it could be then. Could be Winter's Coming on December 15th. Doesn't feel like we're going to have to wait all that time to the next pay-per-view. So either Winter's Coming or Battle of the Belts is probably when we're going to get Bryan Danielson versus Hangman Page. And I wonder if Bryan Danielson will remain a bad guy, will remain a heel after this storyline is over. He definitely could. But as we mentioned, he hasn't really changed all that much. There's been no character arc that would have to be reversed for him to go back to being a bad guy. He could just come out and interrupt somebody that everybody hates, say something that everybody loves, and he'd be back to being a babyface just like that. Very interesting how AEW handles babyfaces and heels. And in that article that we have up at allelitejournal.com, we included some quotes that Tony Khan said about how he handles baby faces and heels. And he talks a bit about how, like, look, sometimes it makes total sense to have clear-cut baby faces and clear-cut heels, but not always. And sometimes it's good to have that diversity. And another program that sort of encapsulated that was CM Punk versus Eddie Kingston, where it wasn't really, like, one guy wasn't playing the babyface role and one guy playing the heel role. It was both guys were just being themselves. And a lot of fans chose to cheer for Eddie Kingston. But now, as CM Punk moves into this program with MJF, it's like 100% fan support for CM Punk. So it's interesting. It's interesting how AEW handles baby faces and heels. And what Bryan Danielson has been doing in the last couple of weeks has been very interesting and very entertaining. And I look forward to his title match against Hangman Page coming up. Maybe winter's coming. Maybe battle for the belts. Okay, that takes us to the main event. 2 4-man teams. So we had Cody Rhodes teaming up with Death Triangle, going up against Malachi Black, Andrade, and FTR as I burp into the microphone. And I got kind of lost in this match because I was just paying attention to how the crowd was reacting to Cody Rhodes. And look, I get it. I get maybe not being totally into Cody Rhodes. He does a lot of things very over the top, very dramatic. His entrance is very, I don't use this word much, but I think it definitely applies here, grandiose. He has a very grandiose entrance. Like, if you look at his ring entrance, it's like so over the top. It's like Jeff Jarrett from TNA Wrestling. Like, Jeff Jarrett gave himself this big elaborate entrance in TNA Wrestling, and it was like, oh, maybe you have a bit too high of an impression of yourself. But Cody, like, he comes up slowly from underneath the ground, and everybody comes out of a tunnel, but he like rises up from the ground and his own special entrance way. And there's this music for when he's elevating to the ground or to the main level. And then there's the sound of wrestling has more than one royal family. You know, basically saying he's royalty. And then all of this like pyro goes off and he comes out looking like Homelander from The Boys. And he's dressed out always in like red, white, and blue type stuff. Like he's, you know how Dusty Rhodes was the everyman? Cody's not the everyman. Cody's like the unachievable man, Hollywood man. Dustin and Dusty are very much the average, the fighting average guy, you know. But Cody doesn't have that same appeal. Cody is very much like his brother and his dad in the sense that he's like, you know, very passionate. He's very dedicated. He puts all of himself into what he does. Like Cody puts everything he's got into everything he does, and so did Dusty, and so did Dustin. You know, Dustin's a very good example of this because Dustin came into the wrestling business not wanting to live in his dad's shadow. So what does he do? He becomes this gold dust character and completely goes like the opposite way. Like very, I want to say like almost rebellious, revolutionary, cutting edge. Like all 3 of the Rhodeses that have been in wrestling are very much like that. And Cody is maybe the most like that of any of them. Like Cody, it would have taken a lot for Cody to leave WWE in 2016. He was probably making a ton of money. He was like, yeah, he wasn't the top guy, but he would like win the Intercontinental title. He was around. He could have just been satisfied with that wrestling career and then gone into movies and stuff like that. But he wanted to challenge himself. And so he went out and he branched out on his own. And who knows if we would get AEW if he didn't do that. I mean, Tony Khan seems like he probably wanted to start a wrestling company at some point and would have. But it would have looked different had Cody not did what he did in 2016. And so I think a lot of fans respect Cody for that attitude that he brings to wrestling, for that passion that he brings for wrestling, and and just sort of like his strong moral compass. Like, he's very dedicated to his ideals. He's very much a stick up for what's right kind of guy. But fans have really turned on him, I think in part because he does do things so over the top. He does sort of, I mean, his entrance and the way he carries himself is very much larger than life, sort of a big Hollywood superstar type way. And that's easy to hate. And Cody is, in some ways, easy to hate. And that's what has made him a good heel in the past. If you remember before AEW, when they were doing that Bullet Club leadership angle, Cody was very easy to hate in that. And part of it is, like, he looks like a movie star, so that's easy to hate. He kind of carries himself like a movie star, so that's easy to hate too. So fans, I think, I really started to notice them turning on him when this feud with Malachi Black started. And part of that is, I think people are really into Malachi Black. Like, I know I wanted Malachi Black to beat Cody because I want Malachi Black to move up into like the upper echelon in AEW. And a good way to do that is by beating Cody Rhodes. Same thing with Andrade. I wanted to see Andrade El Idolo move up into the upper echelon of AEW, and beating Cody Rhodes is a good way to do that. So in my head, like when I'm watching Cody face either one of those two, I want to see Cody lose too. But now it's turned into this like vicious booing of Cody. And it kind of makes me like a little uneasy that he would get booed to that level, because there is so much to respect about Cody Rhodes. I think booing him within the confines of a wrestling show, like good-natured, I'm not cheering for you, is one thing. But really hating on Cody Rhodes, I think, is another. And so he threw his weight belt into the crowd during this match, and the crowd starts chanting for whoever caught it to throw it back. The guy does. It lands on the apron. I think it almost hit Aubrey Edwards. She said on Twitter it didn't hit her. And it reminded me a lot of One Night Stand 2006 when John Cena is in the Hammerstein Ballroom and he threw his t-shirt into the ECW crowd. The ECW crowd, all against Cena, they throw it back. Cena plays this up beautifully. Like, Cena leaned right into it, and he tossed the t-shirt again, and they threw it back again, and John Cena just kept playing the game, and he tossed it back. It did seem like Cody was a little taken aback that they threw the weight belt back. It did look like he was a little, like, that kind of threw him off a little bit. Aubrey Edwards did tweet later that Cody had told her, hey, one day this weight belt might be getting thrown back. So he did kind of expect it to happen at some point, but he seemed like it rattled him a little bit. So there was a part in this match where Tully and Arn Anderson were both in the ring together. They looked like they were going to come to blows, but then they turned their attention to that guy that is the assistant for Andrade. And so that led into the finish where Malachi Black spit the mist into Pac's eyes. This allowed Andrade to hit his hammerlock DDT on Pac for the win. And so we go off the air. But to me, like, and that was a fantastic match, obviously. It was like nonstop action. But to me, I just kept thinking about the reaction to Cody Rhodes and where he goes from here now that this is like very well established that this is the reaction that Cody Rhodes is getting. He's getting the John Cena at One Night Stand 2006 reaction where the fans have turned on him. And Cody has said that he's not going to turn heel because he likes doing the charity work for AEW. I don't know if that matters in 2021. Like, you can be a bad guy and still do charity work, but that's his mentality anyway. So I don't know. There was footage of what happened after Dynamite when Cody was going to the back. He teased like he was going to walk back through the left tunnel, which is where the heels come out of. But then he ended up going back into the right tunnel. So sort of like a little tease like, hey, maybe I am going heel. Maybe I am. All right, but finally, let's just run down the matches that are upcoming now in AEW. So on Rampage, this was filmed after, I'm not going to give away spoilers, this was filmed after Dynamite. This will be the 16th episode of AEW Rampage. So filmed in the same Wintrust Arena in Chicago. We've got Eddie Kingston will go up against Daniel Garcia, and Eddie Kingston probably still upset that he was not able to eat his cake in peace. We've got Adam Cole and Bobby Fish teaming up to take on the Best Friends' Orange Cassidy and Wheeler Yuta. And then in a women's world title eliminator match, Rijo will be taking on Dr. Britt Baker, DMD. And then so far, just the one match has been announced for Dynamite next week, which, as we said, is going to take place in Duluth, Georgia. And we've got the final quarterfinal match in the TBS tournament. And that is Ruby Soho going up against Chris Statlander. That should be good. We might see Bryan Danielson go up against a member of the Dark Order who happens to be from the area. We might get that as well. But they mentioned that Tony Khan will announce more matches for next week's Dynamite on this week's episode of Rampage. And that'll do us for this video. Guys, thanks so much for sticking with us to the end here. Please, if you can, share this video, click the like button, leave a comment, visit us at allelitejournal.com. Really appreciate your support. I'm Gentleman Ian for Spoiler Free Wrestling.